Naomi Calloway was 4 minutes early, and the man at the gate told her she was late. "Interview's at 3, he said, not looking up from his clipboard. "It's 3:04 by my watch." "It's 2:56 by mine." "Then your watch is wrong, same as the last 3 girls." He buzzed the gate open anyway. "Mrs. Holloway will meet you at the door. Don't track mud on the stone." There was no mud. Naomi had checked her shoes twice in the car. But she said nothing because she had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose a job before you started it was to argue with the man holding the clipboard. The Voss estate sat at the end of a gravel drive lined with magnolias, the kind of house that didn't have a street number so much as a name, Brackenfield, carved into a stone post like it was a small country. Naomi stood at the base of the front steps for 1 second longer than she needed to, the way she always did, before walking into a room where she already knew she'd have to prove something twice. The door opened before she reached it. "You're the new one." The woman in the doorway was somewhere past 60, dressed in gray, from collar to hem, a string of keys at her hip like a jailer's. "Elaine Holloway, house manager. You'll call me Mrs. Holloway, not Elaine." "Not ma'am." "Naomi Calloway." "Thank you for. I didn't invite you. Mr. Voss did. I just decide whether you stay." Her eyes moved over Naomi once, slow, the way a customs officer looks at a passport photo that doesn't quite match the face in front of them. "You're younger than the others." "I'm 27. They were all younger than they looked, too, and not one of them lasted past Easter." Mrs. Holloway turned without waiting to see if Naomi followed. "Wren, the new girl's here." A small voice came from somewhere behind a half-closed door. "Another one?" "Another one." The girl who appeared in the hallway was maybe 6, in a yellow dress, with a chocolate smear at the corner of her mouth, hair escaping a ponytail in 3 different directions. She studied Naomi with the unhurried seriousness of someone 20 times her age. "Are you going to cry?" Wren asked. "I wasn't planning on it." Miss Daria cried in the laundry room for almost an hour. Daddy didn't even know. I told Mrs. Holloway, and she said grown-ups cry where children can't hear, like it's a rule. "Wren," Mrs. Holloway's voice had an edge like a folded knife. "Go wash that chocolate off your face before your father sees you looking like a stray." Wren rolled her eyes in a way that suggested this was an old argument, already lost, and trudged off toward the kitchen. Naomi watched her go and felt something settle low in her chest. Not pity exactly, something closer to recognition. A child learning early that her own face needed managing before anyone important looked at it. "Mr. Voss will see you in the study," Mrs. Holloway said. "Don't sit until he tells you to. Don't call him sir, it irritates him. And Miss Calloway," she paused at the study door, hand on the brass handle, and for just a second something flickered behind her eyes that Naomi would not understand the meaning of until much later. "Don't get comfortable here. Comfortable is how people get hurt in this house." Garrett Voss did not stand when she entered. He sat behind a desk the size of a rowboat, a man somewhere in his late 30s, with the kind of stillness that read as expensive, not relaxed, just controlled, the way a held breath is controlled. He didn't offer his hand. He gestured at the chair across from him without quite looking up from the folder in front of him, which Naomi understood, after a beat, to be hers. 5 years of nannying. 2 years at a daycare in Memphis before that. 3 references. He closed the folder. Why does a woman with a teaching credential want to wipe noses for a living? Because the daycare paid $11 an hour, and Memphis doesn't have a shortage of toddlers who need someone patient with them. I do this because I'm good at it, and because it pays better than teaching does, and I've got a mother who needs help with her medical bills. I won't pretend otherwise. Something in his face moved, not quite a smile, more like the absence of the expression he'd been wearing before. Most people lie about the money part. Most people think it makes them look bad. I think it makes me look honest. My daughter is 6. Her name is Wren. She's in 1st grade. Her mother died when Wren was 3. He said it the way a man reads a weather report, flat, already past the part where it could hurt him in front of a stranger. Car accident. Since then she's gone through 4 nannies. The shortest lasted 9 days. The longest lasted 4 months, and left without notice on a Tuesday. Do you know why I'm telling you this? So I know what I'm walking into. So you know that if you're not serious, I'd rather you leave now and save us both the inconvenience. He folded his hands. I don't tolerate lateness. I don't tolerate gossip. There is a non-disclosure agreement in that folder. Everyone in this house signs one. The gardener, the cook, Mrs. Holloway has signed one every year for 11 years. You will discuss nothing about this household with anyone outside it. Not friends, not family. Are we clear? We're clear. I'm not interested in your business, Mr. Voss. I'm interested in your daughter. We'll see how long that lasts. He slid a paper across the desk. Sundays are yours. Every other day, you're here when I say. The pay is $20 to $100 a week. Naomi kept her face level, though the number nearly undid her composure. That was more than double what she'd been making, more than enough to cover her mother's dialysis copays, with room left over. That's generous. It's market rate for a job no one wants to keep. He stood, finally, signaling the interview was over. One more thing, Miss Calloway. His eyes found hers, and held there, and for the first time she saw something underneath the stillness, not warmth, but a kind of exhausted wariness, like a man checking a door he already expects to find locked. Don't fall in love with this house. Don't fall in love with my daughter. And whatever you do, don't fall in love with me. Don't worry, Mr. Voss, Naomi said, picking up her bag. You're not really my type. He almost laughed. He caught it before it reached his mouth, but she saw where it had been. The drive back to her sister's apartment took 40 minutes, and Naomi spent most of it doing math in her head, $2,200 a week against her mother's dialysis copays, against the transplant deductible the hospital kept dangling like a number nobody actually expected a family like hers to reach. Her mother had been on the donor list for 14 months. Her brother Marcus was getting tested next month to see if he matched. Everyone in the family had learned, over those 14 months, to talk about kidneys the way other families talked about weather. Constant, unavoidable, something you checked every morning before deciding how the day would go. They didn't even let you sit until he said so, her sister Renee asked, that night, ladling out beans and rice at the kitchen table, while Naomi's nephew did homework in the next room. It's a different kind of house, Nay. Everything's got a rule. Even the syrup's got a rule. Naomi laughed, but there was an edge to it she didn't entirely understand yet. The house manager looked at me like I tracked something in on my shoes before I even got through the door. You used to come home from that daycare looking just like that. Like somebody made you prove your name was really your name. Renee set the pot down hard enough to rattle the table. You don't have to take it, Naomi. Mama would rather struggle another year than have you swallow somebody's attitude for a paycheck. Mama doesn't have another year to struggle, Renee. That's the whole problem. Naomi said it gently, but it landed the way true things always land. Heavy, final, impossible to argue with. I can handle a house manager with a string of keys and an attitude. I've handled worse for less. That was the blind spot, though she wouldn't have named it that way at the time. Naomi had spent so many years learning to absorb other people's coldness, without flinching, learning to read a room, and decide which battles were worth the cost of her own comfort, that she sometimes mistook a genuinely dangerous silence for just another version of the ordinary disrespect she'd trained herself to outlast. She knew how to survive being underestimated. She had not yet learned, in this house, that being underestimated and being unsafe were not always the same thing, and that the difference might matter more here than it ever had anywhere else. The first month moved the way these things always did, a girl testing the walls of a new presence the way water finds every crack before it commits to flooding the room. Ren tested her with questions first. Are your parents alive? Do you have a husband? Why do you talk slower than Daddy? Then she tested her, with rules, refusing breakfast, hiding shoes, declaring at random intervals that she did not, in fact, need a bath. Naomi met every test the same way, steady, unhurried, never raising her voice, the way she'd learned to handle for younger cousins back in Memphis when her aunt worked doubles. You're not going to leave, Ren said one morning, not quite a question, over a plate of blueberry pancakes, Real maple syrup, the way Mrs. Holloway insisted. though Naomi noticed she'd never once seen anyone actually taste test the syrup to confirm it was real. Everybody says that, and then they leave. I'm not everybody. That's what Miss Darius said. Ren pushed a blueberry around her plate. Daddy scares people. He talks really quiet. When he's mad, and sometimes men come at night in cars, and they have things under their jackets, and Mrs. Holloway says I imagined it, but I didn't. Naomi set down the spatula. What kind of things? I don't know. Gun things. I saw them on TV once. Ren said this with the casual horror of a child reciting a fact she didn't fully understand yet, and Naomi felt the floor of the conversation shift under her, the first small crack opening in what had, until now, looked like an ordinary, if very wealthy, very lonely household. Finish your pancakes, sweetheart, Naomi said, keeping her voice light. We've got a schedule to keep. But she filed it away. A wrong detail noted, set aside, not yet explained. There were good days too, and Naomi held onto them the way she held onto everything good, carefully, gratefully, without letting herself forget they were rationed. The cook, a soft-spoken man named Otis who'd worked the kitchen for 6 years and outlasted 3 house managers before Mrs. Holloway, slipped Naomi an extra plate of cornbread most evenings, without being asked, the way kind people in hard houses learn to feed each other in small currencies. Don't let her get to you, he told her once, nodding toward the housekeeper's quarters. Elaine wasn't always like that. She got harder after her boy moved out. Never talks about him. Just gets a look on her face sometimes, like she's doing math she doesn't like the answer to. Naomi turned that over for a long time afterward, the image of a woman doing math she didn't like the answer to. She didn't yet understand that she was looking, without knowing it, straight at the shape of the danger that would eventually threaten Ren's life, that a person doesn't have to be cruel by nature to become dangerous. Sometimes they only need to run out of better options and convince themselves, quietly, late at night, that what they're about to do isn't really a betrayal, so much as a correction owed to them by a world that had taken more from them than it had ever given back. The wrongness, once she started looking for it, accumulated the way it always does, not as one alarm, but as a slow chord of small notes that, played together, made a sound Naomi didn't like. There was the night a black SUV idled in the side drive for 40 minutes, with its headlights off, and when she mentioned it to Mrs. Holloway the next morning, the older woman's face went carefully, deliberately blank in a way that told Naomi more than a direct denial would have. There was the locked study door that Ren said used to never be locked before Mommy, and the way Mr. Boss's phone rang at 2 in the morning, with a tone Naomi had started to recognize, a tone reserved for calls he took standing in the hallway, with the bedroom door shut. There was Mrs. Holloway's son. Naomi only learned about him by accident, a framed photograph dusted, but never displayed, glimpsed once through the open door of the housekeeper's quarters, a young man, maybe 20, with Mrs. Holloway's same sharp chin. When Naomi asked Ren, casually, if Mrs. Holloway had children, Ren said, she has a son, but Daddy doesn't like to talk about him. I heard her crying on the phone once. She said something about money and a hospital, and I don't think she knew I was listening. A pill bottle out of place. A driver who avoided Naomi's eyes at pickup. A handwriting on a grocery list that didn't match Mrs. Holloway's looping script. None of it, alone, meant anything. Together, they began to feel like a pattern Naomi couldn't yet name. The night everything tipped came 3 weeks later, at Ren's birthday dinner. Garrett had promised, actually promised, a rare enough event, that Ren had circled the date on the kitchen calendar in 3 different colors, that he would be home by 6, no calls, no excuses. At 5:58 he walked, through the door in his shirt sleeves, tie loosened, and sat at the head of the table like a man arriving at his own surprise party. It should have been an easy, golden evening. It almost was. Then Mrs. Holloway brought out the cake, and as she set it down, her sleeve rode up just enough for Naomi to see, for one unguarded second, a phone screen lit beneath the table linen in the housekeeper's other hand, a text thread, a name Naomi didn't recognize, and 3 words she would never quite be able to forget. They leave Friday. Mrs. Holloway caught her looking. The phone vanished into an apron pocket, so fast it might have been a magic trick, and her smile didn't so much as flicker. "Make a wish, baby," she said to Ren, syrup sweet. Ren blew out 6 candles in one breath and asked for a puppy. Garrett laughed, actually laughed, the sound rare enough that Naomi nearly missed what she'd seen in her relief at hearing it. But she hadn't missed it. And later that night, lying awake in the guest cottage, with the window cracked to the sound of crickets, Naomi understood that whatever was happening in this house, it wasn't only between Garrett Voss and whatever past he was running from. Someone inside these walls, someone who poured the syrup and labeled the shampoo by day of the week and had signed an NDA 11 years running, was talking to people outside them. She didn't sleep much after that. If you've been with this story since the gate scene, this is exactly the kind of moment worth sticking around for. Hit subscribe now, because the next turn changes everything Naomi thought she understood about this house. She didn't confront. Not yet. Her grandmother used to say that a smart woman lets a snake believe the grass is still tall before she decides where to step, and Naomi had buried 2 grandmothers' worth of patience into her bones long before she ever set foot on Brackenfield's gravel drive. She called Renee that night from the cottage porch, keeping her voice low. "I think something's wrong here. Really wrong. Not just rich people strange. Dangerous strange." "Then you call the police, Naomi. Tonight. You don't sit on something like that." "I don't have proof yet. I have a phone screen I saw for half a second and a 6-year-old's half memory of guns through a window. If I go to the police with that, or to him with that, and I'm wrong, I lose this job, and that little girl loses one more person who didn't leave her. If I'm right, and I move too fast, I might tip somebody off before there's enough evidence to actually stop them." Naomi pressed her palm flat against the porch rail, grounding herself the way she used to before standing in front of a classroom of 34-year-olds on a bad morning. "I need to be sure, Nay. Sure enough that nobody can talk their way out of it." "You sound like Mama when she's decided something." "Good. Mama's usually right." Instead, she watched. She noted which days Mrs. Holloway left the property and for how long. She noted that the housekeeper's errands always happened on the days Garrett took calls behind closed doors, never overlapping, as though one schedule had been built to avoid colliding with the other. She started keeping a small notebook in her apron pocket, the way she used to track a difficult student's behavior, dates, times, small things that meant nothing alone. She also did something riskier. She got close to Ren's memory. "Sweetheart," she said one evening, brushing out the girl's curls before bed, gentle against the snags the way her own mother used to be gentle with her. "That pin on your dresser, the little silver bird, where'd that come from?" Ren went quiet in the particular way children go quiet when a question touches something tender. "It was Mommy's. Mrs. Holloway gave it to me after. She said Mommy wanted me to have it." A pause. "She said a lot of things after Mommy died. Some of them don't match what Daddy says." "Like what?" "Like Mrs. Holloway said Mommy died because Daddy made bad friends. Daddy said it was an accident, just an accident, nobody's fault." Ren looked up, and her small face held the kind of plain, devastating honesty only children are capable of. "I don't think it was just an accident. I think Mrs. Holloway knows something, and she's mad about it." Naomi kept brushing, keeping her hands steady, though her pulse had picked up considerably. "Did Mrs. Holloway ever say why she was mad?" "She said Daddy owed people. She said owing people gets other people killed." Ren yawned, the conversation already losing its weight to a 6-year-old's exhaustion. "Can you read me the one about the dragon?" Naomi read her the one about the dragon. But she didn't sleep again that night either, turning Ren's words over like stones, looking for what was underneath them. 3 days later, she found the notebook. It was tucked behind a row of canning jars in the pantry, the kind of hiding spot that wasn't really a hiding spot at all, just a place a busy woman trusted no one else would think to look. Naomi hadn't been searching for it. She'd gone in for flour and knocked over a jar, and the notebook had slid out from behind it, onto the floor, already open to a page of dates, times, and a single name written in the margins, over and over, like a worry stone rubbed smooth from handling. Corrigan. Naomi didn't know the name, but she knew enough now. The locked study, the late-night calls, Ren's half-remembered fragments about her father owing dangerous people to understand that whoever Corrigan was, they weren't a friend of this house, and Mrs. Holloway's pages of dates and Garrett's travel schedule lined up entry for entry, almost like a map someone was drawing for a person who wasn't supposed to have one. She put the notebook back exactly where she found it. Her hands were shaking by the time she finished. She didn't go to Garrett right away. She thought about it. God, she thought about it. But something in her, the same instinct that had once made her wait 2 extra weeks before reporting a coworker at the daycare for stealing from the supply closet, told her to be certain first. Being wrong about something like this wouldn't just cost her a job. In this house, it might cost someone their life. So she watched Mrs. Holloway more closely than she'd watched anyone in years. She memorized the rhythm of the woman's days, which calls she took in the garden, out of earshot of the house cameras Naomi had since learned were mounted discreetly in every room except the kitchen pantry and the garden shed. She started carrying her phone, with the voice memo app open in her apron pocket, the screen dark, the microphone live, every time she found herself near Mrs. Holloway and an open phone line. It took 11 days. On the 12th, in the garden shed, she got it. I told you Friday, not before. He's taking her to the coast house, just the two of them, and the new girl. There's no security there past the front gate. I checked it myself. You get what you came for, and my boy gets his transplant paid for. That was the deal, Mr. Corrigan. That was always the deal. The recording cut off. Footsteps. Naomi had already slipped behind the rose trellis, heart slamming against her ribs hard enough she was sure the sound alone would give her away. She had what she needed. Now she needed Garrett to believe her, and a man like Garrett Voss did not believe accusations. He believed proof. She almost didn't make it in time. Garrett announced the coast house trip 2 days later. Wren's idea, a make-up birthday weekend, since the real birthday dinner had been interrupted by a work call he still hadn't explained, and the date he chose was a Friday. Naomi's stomach dropped the moment he said it. That night, she sat across the desk from him in the study for the second time since her interview, except this time she set her phone down between them and pressed play before he could ask why she'd come. He listened to the whole recording without moving. When it finished, the silence in the room had a texture to it, something Naomi could feel against her skin, the particular quiet of a man recalculating every assumption he'd built his life on. Say something, she finally said. Corrigan. His voice had dropped to something low and controlled in a way that frightened her more than shouting would have. He's been hunting for a way back into my life for 3 years. I thought I'd closed every door. He looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, the stillness cracked all the way open. 11 years. She's worked in this house 11 years. I trusted her with my daughter's life. Her son needs a kidney transplant. I think she did this because she didn't see another way to pay for it. That doesn't make it right, but I don't think she set out to get anyone killed, Garrett. I think she got desperate, and desperate people make choices they'd never make, with a clear head and money in the bank. You're defending her. I'm explaining her. There's a difference. Naomi held his gaze. But we have 2 days before she hands your daughter to a man who's been trying to kill you for 3 years, and right now explaining isn't going to save Wren. A plan will. Something in him steadied, the way a man steadies when fear finally has somewhere useful to go. Then we make a plan. This is the part of the story that decides everything. If you want to see exactly how Naomi and Garrett turn the trap back around, subscribe now so you don't miss the next wave. They didn't cancel the trip. That was the hardest part of the plan to sell, even to themselves. Garrett wanted Wren 100 miles from any version of this, locked behind every gate he owned. But Naomi argued, and eventually he agreed, that the only way to end this permanently was to let Mrs. Holloway believe the plan was still in motion right up until it wasn't. They drove to the coast house on Friday exactly as scheduled. Mrs. Holloway packed Wren's bag herself, humming while she folded the girl's swimsuit, and Naomi had to look away to keep her face from giving away what she knew. What Mrs. Holloway didn't know was that Garrett's security detail, 6 men who weren't supposed to exist, men he'd kept on retainer since the week Eva died, and never once mentioned to his own house manager, had been at the coast house since Wednesday morning, dug into the tree line, watching the access road. What Mrs. Holloway didn't know was that the local sheriff, an old friend of Garrett's late father, had two deputies parked a half-mile down the highway, with a clear line to the only road in or out. What Mrs. Holloway didn't know was that Naomi had spent the morning teaching Wren a single sentence, gentle and quiet, framed as a game. If anyone besides Daddy or me ever tells you to go somewhere fast, you say the word sparrow, and you run straight to the kitchen and lock the door, no matter what. The same silver pin from her mother's collar pinned discreetly inside the lining of the girl's jacket, close enough to remind her she was loved, far enough from view that no one searching her would think twice about it. Corrigan's men came at dusk, exactly 4 hours after they were expected, the way men do when they believe no one is watching the road. They got as far as the tree line. It was over faster than Naomi expected, and quieter. No gunfire that reached the house, no chase through the dark, just headlights converging from 3 directions and a silence afterward that felt, for the first time in weeks, like the kind of silence that meant safety instead of danger. Garrett didn't let her watch from the window. He held Wren against his chest in the front hallway, both of them very still, while outside the law did the part of this that belonged to the law. Mrs. Holloway was arrested 2 days later, in the kitchen, mid-sentence, halfway through telling Naomi that the cinnamon needed to go in the lower cabinet, not the upper one. She didn't run. She didn't deny it once the recording was played for her. She only asked, in a voice Naomi had never heard her use before, small and stripped of all its starch, whether her son would still get his surgery if she went to prison. "That's not up to me," the detective told her. But it was, in a way, up to Naomi. A week later, she sat across from a hospital social worker and asked the only question that mattered to her: how a frightened mother's bad choice and a sick young man's blameless need for a kidney might be kept separate from each other in whatever came next. Garrett, when she told him what she'd done, didn't argue. He simply transferred the money the boy's surgery required to a hospital fund earmarked in Eva's name, the same fund he'd been quietly building since the day Naomi told him about her own mother's dialysis bills, months before any of this began. "You could have let her drown," he said. "I could have, but Wren still calls her Mrs. H sometimes, out of habit, and I don't want my daughter." Naomi caught herself on the word, the slip too natural to take back even if she'd wanted to. Garrett's eyes found hers and held there, warm in a way that had nothing to do with the stillness he wore for the rest of the world. "I don't want Wren's whole memory of this house to be made of nothing but betrayal. People can do terrible things out of love for someone else. That doesn't erase the harm. But it's not nothing, either." 6 months later, Brackenfield looked the same from the gate. Magnolias, gravel, the stone post, with the house's name carved into it like a small country. But the inside of it had changed in ways no one outside the family would ever fully see. Garrett had closed the last of the old accounts, the ones that came with men who idled in driveways with their headlights off. He'd opened a scholarship instead, the Eva Voss Memorial Fund for children who'd lost a parent to violence they didn't cause, the first recipient a quiet boy from the next county, over whose father had died in the same kind of senseless collision that had taken Eva. He kept the study door unlocked now. Wren had noticed and asked about it, and he'd told her the truth, that some doors only stay locked when a man is still afraid of what's on the other side of them, and he wasn't, not anymore. Mrs. Holloway served 18 months. Her son's transplant succeeded. She wrote Wren a letter every few months that Naomi read first and decided, each time, was safe enough for a child's eyes, not because the woman deserved forgiveness she hadn't yet fully earned, but because a little girl was allowed to hold 2 true things in her heart at once: that someone had hurt her family, and that the same someone had also, in her own broken way, loved her for 6 years before she ever did. The silver sparrow pin lived in a small wooden box on Wren's dresser now, polished, safe, no longer a secret anyone needed to keep. Some evenings Naomi found the girl just looking at it, turning it over in her palm the way you turn over a stone to see what's been living underneath it all along. "Do you think Mommy would like you?" Wren asked one night, out of nowhere, the way she asked most of her hardest questions. "I think," Naomi said, sitting on the edge of the bed. that your mommy would be glad somebody's here who loves you exactly as much as she did. Her own mother's transplant came. Through that spring, a deceased donor match, sudden and ordinary in the way these things sometimes are, after months of waiting for them to feel like anything but a miracle. Naomi sat in the hospital waiting room with Renee and Marcus, and when the surgeon finally came out to tell them it had gone well, she found herself thinking, unexpectedly, of a sentence her grandmother used to say on the porch back in Memphis about gardens and walls, and what happens when you tend to small cracks before they swallow the whole structure. She understood it differently now than she had, as a child reciting it back, without really hearing it. Some houses fall because no one tended the cracks. Hers hadn't, this time, and neither had Brackenfield, in the end, not because either house was perfect, but because somebody inside them had finally chosen truth over the comfortable silence that almost let the cracks win. Garrett stood in the doorway, watching them both, and didn't say anything at all, but Naomi had learned, by now, exactly what his silences meant. This one meant stay. This one meant home. She intended to. If this story moved you the way it moved us to write it, subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a new one waiting for you next week, and you won't want to miss how it begins.